Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport. We have touched on tragic motorsport tales a few times on this channel. Sadly, it's something that comes up a lot in motorsport, both in history and in more recent times. There have been literally hundreds, if not thousands, of casualties in racing, from the first recorded fatality in 1900 to a couple that happened in 2024. No matter the improvements in safety, there will always be danger in motorsport. It's part of the reason we enjoy it so much. But there is no worse news in racing than hearing another young driver has lost his life. Today, I want to talk about the case that really hit me on a personal level. We are going to be looking at the story of Kieth O'Dor, one of my favourite touring car drivers of the early 90s, and one who tragically lost his life in a touring car race. We will look at his career and the circumstances around his death and, selfishly, what it meant to me. So make sure you subscribe and let's jump into the video. Kieth O'Dor was born in Salisbury, Wiltshire, not far from where my nan lived, funnily enough. He was the son of a Hungarian immigrant, János O'Dor, the owner and founder of Janspeed, an automotive performance tuning company that specialised in exhaust, and of course it ran the Janspeed racing team that Kieth O'Dor raced for. Sadly, János O'Dor passed away a couple of years ago, but Janspeed is still going strong. Kieth O'Dor began his motorsport career in national rallying in the mid-80s. In what category or car? I don't know. There is almost no information about his time in rallying. He moved to the Uniroyal British Production Saloon Car Championship in 1987, winning his class in a Peugeot, before winning the overall championship in a Ford Sierra in 1989. A year later, he won the British Group N Saloon title, this time in a Janspeed prepared Nissan Skyline GTR. And from here on in, as far as I can tell, he only raced Nissans for the rest of his racing career. He also raced the Skyline in the Spa 24-hour race in 1990 and 1991, finishing 11th in 1990 alongside Barry Williams and Joe Webber in a Janspeed prepared car, and 6th in 1991 with the Nismo Zexel team and drivers Takayuki Kinoshita and Dirk Scheusman. It was also in 1991 that Kieth O'Dor made his British touring car debut. The BTCC had moved away from the turbocharged Ford Sierra Cosworth domination, and now a new 2-litre only series was in effect, at the start of what was the Super Touring era. Many new manufacturers appeared on the grid at this time, one of which was a Janspeed Nissan Primera EGT. O'Dor did most of the season on his own, but a second car was later prepared for Formula 1 driver Julian Bailey. As you'd expect with a new car and a new team, performances to begin with weren't great, but O'Dor did score a few top 10 finishes, and the car improved throughout the year, allowing O'Dor to get a best finish of 6th place at Thruxton. Some improvements were made in 1992 and Kieth O'Dor ran more comfortably in the top 10, but the best result was still a 6th place at the opening race at Silverstone, and teammates Andy Middlehurst, James Weaver and Tiff Needell didn't do any better, although all three scored points, even if it was a single point for Needell in his only race of the year. In 1993, Kieth O'Dor was joined by experienced touring car ace Wyn Percy, who had also had experience with the Nissan brand, including briefly in the BTCC. Tiff Needell also returned for more races in 1993, but Kieth O'Dor was the star of the Nissan show. Whilst never a title contender in a year, Team Schnitzer turned up with Joachim Winkelhock and dominated the series. Kieth O'Dor finished 6th overall and performances had improved massively. What it proved was Kieth O'Dor was a good driver and with the right tools could get the results that proved it. He finished 2nd in back-to-back races at Brands Hatch, but what made him one of my favourite drivers forever was his victory at Silverstone, the first for Nissan under Super Touring car rules. In the second half of the year, the arrival of Ford pushed Nissan a little further down the field, but it was still a standout year. By 1994, other manufacturers were spending millions on development of the cars, and Janspeed and Nissan couldn't keep up. Even with backing from Old Spice and another ex-Formula 1 driver in Eric van der Poel, Nissan had it tough. Kieth O'Dor did finish 4th at Snetterton, but failed to finish in the top 10 in the second half of the year, and dropped to 16th overall. At this point, Nissan stepped away from the BTCC and changed its focus to the Super Tourenwagen Cup, taking Kieth O'Dor and Janspeed with them. The Super Tourenwagen Cup had begun in 1994, and Nissan were a part of it, with Michael Bartels and Yvonne Capelli racing for the team. They were quite some way off BMW and Audi at the front, but Bartels did manage a 2nd place at the Oostenrijkring and a 6th overall in the Drivers' Championship. In 1995, Kieth O'Dor joined the Nissan efforts, alongside Sascha Masson and a returning Yvonne Capelli. Kieth O'Dor performed brilliantly. He left his teammates in the dust, despite both having more experience on European circuits, and in the case of Yvonne Capelli, a former Formula 1 driver who had raced for Ferrari. And for context, that's like Lewis Hamilton and Josh Cook becoming teammates in TCR Europe, and Cook beating Hamilton at almost every race. Throughout the entirety of the first half of the season, Kieth O'Dor was and ever present in the top 10. But more was to come. At Avis, he took Nissan's first win in the Super Tourenwagen Cup, a massive achievement for Nissan, who had been struggling up to that point. It was that same weekend where Kieth O'Dor lost his life. A mistake led to O'Dor spinning in front of the field, and despite a couple of cars avoiding him, an unsighted Frank Bieler hit the Nissan hard. Kieth O'Dor died later that evening. It was a horrible accident. Frank Bieler was absolutely not to blame. Avis was an incredibly fast and dangerous track that had a reputation, and by 1998 was no longer in use. Also, the Nissan was one of the only right-hand drive cars on the grid, which happened to be the side Bieler collided with. Whatever the cause, it didn't matter. The fact was, Kieth O'Dor had died at the age of 33. At the time, I was 5 years old, and as I said earlier in the video, Kieth O'Dor was a favourite of mine. Despite being very young, I watched the old BTCC season reviews over and over again, and 1993 in particular was a favourite of mine, partly because of Kieth O'Dor's win, and also Julian Bailey in a Toyota. I like the underdogs getting victories. Can you imagine the effect of a 5-year-old when one of his favourite drivers has been killed in a crash? Nothing. I didn't know, I was 5. If it made the news, I didn't see it. We didn't have the internet until the late 90s, and cable TV until the early 2000s. I didn't even know the Super Tourenwagen Cup existed until I read about it in a book about super touring cars a few years later. Young me probably never even considered there were other touring car series in the world. All these famous drivers just turned up and raced every now and again. I didn't learn about what happened to Kieth O'Dor until much later, and even then it was probably more of a, oh, that's a shame moment. Contemplating it now, it makes me think what could have been. Well, Nissan stopped racing after the crash in 1995, but did return in 1996, and importantly, they had Anthony Reid in the team. Nissan would only win one other Super Tourenwagen Cup race, which was Roland Ash in 1998. Instead, they returned to the BTCC with Anthony Reid and David Leslie, and by 1999 were the top team, taking Laurent Aiello to the title, and then they left, rarely taking part in motorsport since, outside of Japan and the odd GT appearance with the Skyline. If Kieth O'Dor hadn't been killed, he'd have probably returned to the BTCC either alongside Reid or instead of. And as Nissan became regular race winners, maybe it would have been Kieth O'Dor lifting the title in 1999 instead of Aiello. Nissan were also regulars at Le Mans in the 90s and 2010s, so if he was still knocking around, O'Dor could have probably got a drive in one of those cars. Or maybe he would have left Nissan as Reid did and go somewhere else. We'll never know, and that is a massive shame because Kieth O'Dor was a great racing driver. The driver who put Nissan on the map with their first Super Touring wins in Britain and Europe, and whose great performances left a mark on a little boy who would grow up and start a YouTube channel and do a video talking about how great Kieth O'Dor was. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, let me know your thoughts on Kieth O'Dor in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.